Thanks, Tyler. Well, men and women across the nation have put their lives at risk to serve our country.
Members of the military travel overseas to war. Many have trouble leaving behind their experiences. Some have trouble sleeping when they get home. Others are shaken even by sudden sounds. And all of these things can add up and even lead to suicide. KIMT News 3's Casey Walsh is speaking with veterans and their families impacted by this and explains what they can do to fight for themselves.
So one of his best friends was riding his Harley for him. When he passed away, it was a big shock to everyone, all of his friends. Like I said, he was working full-time with the Guard, so he was, interacting with his superiors every day.
And it was a shock to Jamie, who was married to Scott Baribar 2 years this November. They met when he came back from Afghanistan in the summer of 2011 at the manufacturing facility they both worked at, and instantly clicked.
It's just something you kind of know. You're like, yeah, this is going to be my best friend.
She describes her husband, Scott, as a happy person who served his country, but looking back, she did notice difficult situations for him that he didn't talk much about, like his lack of sleep.
It was common for him to get maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, but it was like his mind would just keep racing.
It was like that since his return from deployment. Now, Jamie wishes she had pushed him to talk to someone about the problems. Though it was common for Scott, if he was sick or not feeling well, he didn't want to go to the doctors, risking getting discharged from the military.
He didn't go to the VA or he didn't see anybody for anything. Looking back, I wish I would have gone with him. I'd rather have him be mad at me for making him go to the doctor than him be gone.
Jamie says when veterans or people serving their country die by suicide, there's more going through their head than we know. These men and women are being haunted by nightmares or negative experiences. And with her husband's suicide in March, Jamie's perspective on mental health has changed a lot. She says, unlike a car, there's no red light that glows when something is wrong in your mind, and it's not always easy to tell.
It's important for family members, like if you hear somebody say that one thing that seems a little bit off, stop and ask them, don't ignore it.
Iraq veteran Brian Sampson isn't ignoring the problems he faces. He's a firm believer that talking to someone can save your life, especially when you're having bad days.
I had pretty good PTSD when I first came home. I was having a hard time sleeping at night. I still do now, just not to the extent because I've done a lot of counseling. I take my medications. But the big part of my PTSD is my nightmares from being over there.
And Brian is not alone. Up to 20% of those who served in Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom suffer from symptoms of PTSD in a given year, according to the United States Department of Veteran Affairs. Sampson believes many vets like himself don't like to talk about what happened overseas and what they've done during combat. But they might open up if it's with other combat veterans. For Sampson, it's a combination of knowing what he's going through is okay, and he and others like him are needed.
My biggest issue is I felt when I first came back, I couldn't work.
So he started volunteering at places like North Iowa Youth Center to give back to the community, be a productive member of society, and ultimately making himself feel needed and wanted. And it helped.
I'm convinced that it's those personal connections and one-on-one mentoring and showing that veteran that you care and you appreciate them and what they did for our country that could save a life.
Gabriel Hauglin is a military attorney who represents victims of sexual assault in the military. He served his country in Afghanistan as well. 2010 through 2011, he was an infantry officer who oversaw an infantry platoon. Hauglin says what many people don't know is military life is one of constant stress.
Those stress chemicals build up in your brain over time because you don't get a chance to relax. It's constantly an adrenaline surge, it's fight or flight, it's stress hormones, it's am I going to die today, is today the day I have to shoot somebody, and the buildup of that stress over time is what takes its toll on the mind of the military service member.
According to the United States Department of Veteran Affairs' most recent report in 2014, an average of 20 veterans died from suicide each day. Of those, 6 of the 20 utilize VA services. For many veterans, going to the VA office may be their only option. Unfortunately, it can be hard to get in and get seen. That's why Haugland worked to try and reform the VA with the Iowa chapter of a group known as Concerned Veterans for America. He says a big part of the idea was veterans' choice.
We argued that veterans should have a card that entitles them to seek care wherever they want to. In other words, if you like the VA and you can get into the VA, good for you, go to the VA. But if you have a civilian doctor like I do, Dr. Josh Baker down in Rockwell, and I want to see him because I trust him and I get great care for him and I can get in and get seen by him and he understands my full medical history, then I should be able to take that same card, walk that over to him, and the VA pays for it. And that is not currently the situation. Veterans are forced to go to the VA or pay out of pocket.
Haugland says it's important for vets to know it's okay to seek treatment if you're experiencing things like symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. For Haugland, it's symptoms such as panic attacks and night terrors. And to remember, as Haugland puts it, America loves you. You fought for our country, and it's time to fight for yourself.
You have to be willing to stand up and say, I'm struggling with this. We have to get rid of this stigma. We have served our country. We went through things that the average American will not go through. And so when we come back, we need to be honest. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be honest with our brothers and sisters and say, look, I think you need to stop in and see the doc, okay? I'm seeing some behavior that you have right now that is worrying me.
With my husband, it was he never quite felt good enough. Like he was never quite felt like he was doing a good enough job.
Now a widow, Jamie encourages families to talk, and don't worry if your partner gets mad.
Even if you have to frame it as you want to go to marriage counseling to work on your communication or something, whatever that might be, just to even get them in the door to talk to somebody, and it never hurts.
Casey Walsh, KIMT News 3.
And if you find yourself or a loved one facing PTSD, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs offers resources like a Veterans Crisis Line for mental health crisis intervention and support 24/7.
There are also free mobile apps like PTSD Coach that can help with self-managing the disorder.